So Nicolas Mansart, I'm the porteur de chair of the chair Artificial and Natural Movement. We are studying how robot moves, and well, basically what we are trying to achieve is that, and we are trying to push toward having that in real life, and not only in videos, not only in laboratories, but that's really key examples of what we are able to achieve. When we see that, well, I think for quadrupeds now is kind of obtained. Many quadrupeds are able to walk. Last year we came with the solo robot. For humanoids, it's more difficult. This is in lab, and it's not possible to bring that out of the lab. And there is a very nice decoding of this video in maybe you know this Arte show Le Dessous des Images. They are explaining what you can see, what you should trust, what you should not trust. I refer that to you. That's the key examples. But what you have to understand is that in the last 5 years, we have seen an acceleration. Now there is many labs in the world that are able to achieve similar performance. Maybe not excellent YouTube videos like Boston Dynamics, but they are very good. In particular with quadrupeds. That's mostly based, I would say, on advance in hardware. So we have better hardware, and this hardware is only based on intuition, not on artificial intelligence. So we are still lacking of tools of artificial intelligence to design the hardware. And mostly for making a robot walk these days, what you can simply achieve is to artificially design each part of the movement manually. So typically you would say, my center of mass should follow a kind of sinusoidal curve. My flying foot would follow a Bezier curve of degree 5. My torso should be straight, etc., etc. Then you combine all that, and building all that, you can make this solo robot climb the stairs. And that's just simple quadratic programs running in real time, very, very basic level of decision. So very good for building a demonstration and not so good to generalize to the real world. What we also have seen during the last 5 years is a grown interest and maturity in terms of automatically designing the movement from a high-level objective function and some model describing the motion capability of the robot. And typically this model would be a mechanical model, not something specific, something absolutely generic for any kind of motion that the robot can achieve. So we call that a simulator. And mostly now we have we are seeing complete, we call that whole body motion intelligence, where you give a simulator, you give a high-level task, and then the solver would automatically decide what movement to achieve. We can understand this way of designing the movement by optimal control. So in optimal control, the artificial intelligence problem that you will set up would be to decide what is the future trajectory of the robot by optimizing an objective function. For example, for this rabbit, you want to cross the finish line as soon as possible, and knowing some constraints. So typically, you know where you are in the world by state estimation. You know the evolution model. So if you push on the power, you would go faster. If you turn, you would go on the left, go on the right. So we call that the evolution model or the simulator of the system. And other constraints, like for example, you should not go out of the road. So pushing forward fast, you would cross the line and you are done. Not good. You try to turn, you will cross the line later, leave the road later. You are done as well. Not good. Finally, in yellow, you would find a feasible trajectory. It's not the best one, but then you would optimize this trajectory to get the green one, which is the optimal trajectory. And this would be written as a big NLP, a big nonlinear problem, not convex, with constraints, with hard constraints. And you have to solve that in real time, because once you have a trajectory, you are not going to track this trajectory, but as soon as possible, you are going to recompute the trajectory from the latest state estimate and re-optimize. You then would only apply the very beginning of the control trajectory that you computed. We call that the optimal policy. So this way is a way of computing the optimal policy with, we would say, an auxiliary variable, which is the trajectory that you are not going to use, which is just there for you to compute the optimal policy. So maybe here I can make a break, because I saw that during an ET, I had repeated that so many times and many times and many times that it was kind of clear for everybody. And I'm not a mathematician, I'm a roboticist. I have mathematics skills, but among other mathematicians here from, for example, IMT, I feel very, very little, honestly. So I really think that this problem is simple compared to, I don't know, optimal transport, for example, that we saw yesterday. But discussing yesterday during coffee breaks, I happened to understand that it was still not clear for everybody. So maybe for everybody here that has the skills to build optimal optimization problems, who is not able to understand that, who is not familiar with optimal control? I would be very interesting to know that. Can you raise your hand if you're not familiar with this mathematical writing? So yeah, okay. So not so many, but still. So we are very, very familiar with that, and we would be very happy to teach you with that. That's a message that I need to pass. Okay, so we are building efficient solver to solve this problem. So basically, this problem would have something like 10,000 variables, which is 100 variables for each state that you want to optimize, and you are optimizing 100 states in the timeline. So that's 10,000 variables, not so big, not so small, non-linear. The big problem is that we need to solve that in 10 milliseconds. And we are able to do that. And the key word, if you know a little bit this field, is that we are doing a solver that is multiple shooting based on differential dynamic programming to handle the sparsity with augmented Lagrangian to handle the constraint. And again, very happy to spend some time to explain that to you. Maybe one point for those manipulating matrices. So the key aspect to reach this 10 millisecond deadline is to handle the sparsity and the structure. So the big matrix, 10,000 variables that we have, so that's 10,000 per 10,000, would be super sparse, but with a lot of structure. So all these letters here are blocks of size 100, and all the rest, the white, this is 0. And basically, you can rewrite that as a block 3-diagonal matrix. And then each block is again sparse. This sparsity is coming from the mechanical structure of the robot. It's less sparse, so maybe here there is 2/3 of sparsity. So it's not very good in terms of sparsity, but again, a very nice structure that you can also take into account. And we have to take that into account at 2 different levels, because that's 2 different sparsity. Then it's non-convex. And here we are bringing machine learning, so plain old good machine learning, to create a database of examples where the robot can, in real time, search to get a warm start that would help him to converge to a global minimum, or to what we hope to be a global minimum. So some examples, here with my colleague Ludovic Righetti, co-supervising a student, Sébastien Clef. So this is the first time we are showing this video. Oh, no. I will stick to this one. Where you just apply that, and here in 1 millisecond, because this robot does not have so many degrees of freedom, you get some behavior that is able to generalize. So in real time, is discovering the path behind that we were not expecting, and that is discovered in real time. So we could call that zero-shot learning. Applying that to locomotion, so here push recovery with the biped, or climbing stairs with the biped. And that's a premiere. So it's the first time in the world that we are able to get whole body optimal control to climb stairs with the biped. And this is going up and down the stairs with a quadruped robot. That's an excellent work done in a European project that was fueled by Anity, where we are able to climb stairs even there is some steps that are missing. So done in cooperation, done by Edinburgh in cooperation with us. So that's where we are really strong, and we are really, without any kind of modesty, among the best in the world to optimize these kind of big problems of optimal control in real time for such large systems, and to apply that on real robots. Now, let's see maybe the mainstream in terms of robot programming in what we call artificial intelligence or machine learning. So the problem that we are trying to solve is this optimal control problem. And you can understand the geometry of the solution to be twofold. Either you can see the solution to be the trajectories, which are well, obviously the black line, black curves. Or you can also understand the solution to that to be the optimal policy, and the policy is the function to which state point associate the vector that would drive the control of the robot. So the policy would be a vector field. So I represent that by the black arrow. And obviously, if you have one for cheap, you can get the other one for cheap. So for example, if you're able to compute any trajectory, you take only the beginning and you get your vector field. If you have the vector field, you just interpolate the points and you would get the trajectory. So theoretically, passing from one to the other is okay. But now in practice, we have two communities that are searching this solution differently. If you are looking for a trajectory, then the problem that you are going to solve is going to be called a trajectory optimization problem. So it's a simple object because it's from time to control space. And if you are doing that, you are likely from the community of motion planning. If you are looking for the policies and you are doing policy optimization, sometimes called reinforcement learning, we can argue if it is exactly the same word. You are searching the policy, so it's a more complex object from the state to the control, not from time to control. And then if you are searching this object, very likely you are in the reinforcement learning community. So reinforcement learning is another way of solving the same problem. There is many differences, and maybe one key difference is that you are not writing that as an optimization problem. When we write trajectory optimization, we just apply vanilla algorithm. So we take the book of Nocedal, and we just implement the algorithm of Nocedal, taking into account the structure that we have. So injecting knowledge on top of the algorithm that exists. We are not inventing new algorithms. In reinforcement learning, the algorithms they are writing are not optimization problem. There are strange problems where you are training two networks, one which is a policy network that we call the actor, another one which is an auxiliary variable, we call that the critic. So it represents what we call the value function. The value function is the best score that you can obtain at each state if you apply the optimal policy. So instead of trying to solve this problem, they are trying to leverage on the Bellman principle to solve a local optimization problem. So the policy is greedy on the value, and then integrating what is in the end a differential equation. So it's very specific problem. So for example, this problem here, you cannot implement that in, I don't know, IPOpt. You take off-the-shelf optimization solver, and this would not go inside. They have to write their own reinforcement learning solvers. And well, off-the-shelf, you can get reinforcement learning solvers, and you apply that to our new robot, Sasa, and you get a decent walk for going even outdoor. So we can compare both. Trajectory optimization, we get the guarantees, the nice guarantees of optimization problem. So in particular here, we are super linear because we are using something similar to Hessian. We have real-time computations. We can satisfy constraints. So if we have hard constraints, we can take that into account. On the other hand, we only are local because it's a non-convex problem, and maybe we are more local than others, like optimizing policy. We have difficulties to optimize the discontinuities, so in particular contact impacts. That are stuff where we don't have the gradients, and since we are gradient-based, or optimization gradient-based, we have problems with that. And maybe more difficult, we cannot include directly multimodal sensing. We are state feedback-based. On the other hand, policy optimization would give us something that very likely is more global, even if maybe we are not able to characterize that mathematically. The solvers are not gradient-based, so they are more prone to handle discontinuities. We can have direct multimodal sensing, but we have no guaranteed convergence because we are not based on plain old optimization problems. We are not using very much the information that we have in the model, in particular the derivatives, and we have difficulty to transfer that to the robots, in particular because the training time is super long, so it makes tuning very, very difficult. And we are absolutely not able to handle constraints so far. There is some work in this direction, but nothing mature. And again, if you are not familiar with that, we can teach you. We organized during ANITI a virtual school, a thematic school about reinforcement learning, with in particular Sebastian Jershinovic and Emmanuel Rachelson. we could do that again. We could do more specific class for shorter term if you want. Like we could give you the basis of that in 2 hours. So if you are not familiar with that concept, if you don't know what is an actor critic, and you are a mathematician interested in that field, just by curiosity, tell us. That maybe would be one of the contributions of the chair. So we just received a funding to work with Ludovic Righetti. So Ludovic is currently in a sabbatic from New York University for 6 months in LAS. We also suggested that he could be one of the chair of the attractivity chair for the next version of Affinity. But for now, we receive a small budget to start investigating better reinforcement learning solvers. We would call that policy optimization, which would be rewriting the reinforcement learning problem as a plain good optimization problem, and trying to, by that way, get optimization guarantees, guarantees of convergence, guarantees of constraint satisfaction, this kind of stuff. So I won't go in the detail of that. We already have some kind of project, and we would be very happy to share it, to discuss it. Again, I think we could benefit more of interaction with the mathematician. We all are busy, and I don't blame anybody, especially I don't blame myself. But if you want to discuss that with us, and we are ready to spend the time that is needed to just give you the basic knowledge, and very likely it would be easier for you to get that than for us. So in conclusion, I believe we should optimize and learn, which is work on trajectory optimization, work on policy optimization, work on understanding how learning is going in that. I think in the same direction that the inspiring talk of Thomas explained yesterday. We still need to have something like trajectory optimization to have generalization in time. We are able to do that, so it's good, and that would be maybe a key feature to enforce constraints. But we also need to have policy learning, because we want to have something pre-computed offline. We want to have globality that only policy learning can bring us. This way of working with learning and optimization, I really think that this is the core of hybrid AI. That's the part that I like the best in Anity. I think it's pretty, maybe not unique anymore, but I think we are really in the front line for defending this aspect. Another aspect that is very key for us is to work with joint laboratories with industrial, because robotics is a really greedy domain. It's asking for a lot of money, a lot of technological support. So we are working with Airbus. We are working also with a technology provider like PAL Robotics. And I think also that's something that Anity is bringing us, and that's also very good. Good. Yeah, so you have 3 colors. They are not showing well, but basically in the first time we would like to use what we have from the policy learning to guide the MPC problem. So get some globality, in particular by warm starting. So you get what you learn from the policy, and you just give that as a warm start to the solver. Maybe working exactly on what we would learn in the policy. So maybe not learn the policy, but learn the trajectory. So a bigger output, but that should be able to produce. And also learn the value function and give that at the terminal cost for the MPC, so that we have a longer horizon, or surrogate for a longer horizon. In the second time, we would like to use the derivatives that we get from trajectory optimization inside the policy learning, basically doing Sobolev learning. So we have some prototype of that, and it seems to work. So guiding at the second order, at the first order, the supervised learning here. Supervising with the value, the function, and the derivative of the function. And in the third time, using the MPC as an output layer for the policy network, so that we get hard constraints at policy evaluation. So that would be the 3 steps. There is many other way of working, but that's the idea. In general, we would like to inject derivatives everywhere we can, because we know the derivative of the simulator. We want to benefit that on the RF.
Nicolas, you have a question?
Okay, I can say that I don't see it much for now. So MPC is state state-based. So you need to know a predictable state in the beginning. So you need to estimate that so that you can predict the trajectory. It's much more difficult if you get an image, for example, to predict what would be the evolution of the image. So in RL, you can do that because you don't have to predict from what you get from the sensor. You can directly evaluate the policy. You don't have at every control cycle to predict the trajectory. It seems very difficult to get that inside MPC. So for me, it's a black spot for now. What I can say is that now we are trying to investigate that through RL because that's where RL is strong. So we are trying to push now to have our quadruped robot to be sensor feedback and not state feedback like it is for now. So for now, our RL schemes, they are trained state feedback, and we are trying to push to get that visual feedback.
Yes. So Nicolas, I'm impressed because you are solving a sequence of non-convex optimization problem with constraints, and where you have a human, robots, and those solvers, they don't, in general, they don't converge all the time. So you have this notion of trust that is very important with a solver. That is, I think it's hard to prove things on those kind of solvers. So my question is, does it happen in the sequence that the non-convex optimization problems fails, and do you have to recover? Do you have some recovery techniques, or it happens just, which I can also understand that by continuity, in fact, you have a kind of modification of problems, and just starting from the previous solution helps you to converge?
Yes. So in general, MPC works by translating the previous solution and re-optimizing it. In the case you have an obstacle like this bar in front of the robot, the continuity of the solution would stuck the robot near the bar. The robot would not be able to find that he has to go back because this is not in the same local optimum. And for that, we are relying on machine learning. So we have a memory of motion, so a library of examples, a neural network that is encoding a library of examples. And the robot is seeking inside this library, inside this memory, to find the global optimum. And it's an approximation to the global optimum, and then it would converge to it.
And for constraint satisfaction, you check this also?
Yeah, so that's the same. So what I can say is, if you have a constraint solver and it converges, then you have a guarantee of your solution. Now, can you guarantee that the solver converges? I think you can through the machine learning. But at least in real time, you exactly know that what you are doing, what you are sending to the robot is safe. And it's safe during all the preview horizon. So if you have 1 second or 2 seconds of preview horizon, which is more or less what we can do now, you know that during 2 seconds you are safe.
It may not be optimal, but it will be safe, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then if you start to see your solver diverging, well, you have 2 seconds to stop the robot. Which, it's not perfect, but it's much better than if you just...
in fact, you cannot do more with non-convex problems.
For now, you cannot do more, yeah. But I also think that it should be possible through that mean to guarantee what you learn. I think we should be able to do that as well.
Okay, thank you. One more question.
So we are working on bio. So there is a part of natural movement, but the way we are working is more to use our mathematical framework to explain human motion and to explain robot motion and to generate robot motion. A little bit transfer from one to the other. We are not doing a lot of imitation learning, for example. Some people in my team are doing what we call inverse optimal control, which is trying to guess or to model the behavior of the human by finding what is the cost function that is driving the motion of the human. But not so much in terms of collecting data from the human and applying that to the robot, mostly because the mechanics of the underlying system is very, very different. For example, the mass distribution of me and the robot, we are approximately the same mass, but the mass distribution is very, very different. And for example, my robot is walking like that, which is good because he has very strong knees. And I have to walk straight knees because my mechanics is good for that. So this kind of transfer is more difficult to get.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicolas, for the nice talk. Thank you.